it's the early morning of the 7th of the 7th of the 7th this year, about 1:35 a.m. My friend Paula and I arrived at the top of Knapp Hill. And then around 3:13, I'm told from the timing on the tape that we all experienced a big white flash in the sky. At this point of the evening, about 3:20, it's the darkest point of the night, and as the sky was sort of really laden with clouds, there was absolutely nothing. It was a pitch black field, and there was nothing to be seen down below. But at about 20 to 4, some light was creeping in then from the east with the sun coming up, and we began to see a shadow, or what appeared to be shadows on the field. It was at this point when he looked through the camera that we all could see through the viewfinder that there was a massive, absolutely massive, spectacular formation down there below us.
You've been researching crop circles for what, 11 years now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In that time, we've seen the crop circle patterns changing. They started off with very kind of basic circular type shapes. The geometric shapes increased, then we started to get pictograms. What's happening now? What's the kind of current pattern?
The actual evolution continues as it has since 1978, which was the inception of the first major crop circles in southern England that were taken seriously. Since then, as you say, there has been a constant evolution.
On the evening of, it's the early morning of the 7th of the 7th of the 7th this year, about 1:35 a.m, my friend Paula and I arrived at the top of Knapp Hill to begin an all-night vigil looking over Eastfield in the hope that a formation may appear. And then around 3:13, I'm told from the timing on the tape that we all experienced a big white flash in the sky, which very momentarily lit the whole sky up and the whole landscape, but it was very momentarily. At this point of the evening, about 3:20, it's the darkest point of the night, and as the sky was sort of really laden with clouds, there was absolutely nothing. It was a pitch black field, and there was nothing to be seen down below. But at about 20 to 4, some light was creeping in then from the east with the sun coming up, and we began to see a shadow, or what appeared to be shadows on the field. It was at this point when he looked through the camera that we all could see through the viewfinder that there was a massive, absolutely massive, spectacular formation down there below us.
This was the formation that occurred on the 7th of the 7th of 07 last year.
Yeah.
From a construction point of view, first of all, you've got to have, at least on this construction, two centres to work that particular geometry out. So you would expect to find somewhere around here post holes.
That certainly is the case. That this fine, what would be considered a construction line, was certainly laid down first in both of these major arcs, However, we went into this formation very early on the first day, on the 7th of July, and we actually managed to get into lots of these circles and pick up the crop and examine this fine line, and that was not crushed in this situation where it would have had to have been crushed rhythmically if this was made by people. Also, you know, the peripheries of all the main circles, you know, to define a circle you need to, you know, effectively create your, you know, your circle, your outer line, and typically on a hoaxed formation there would be heavy crushing to define a circle in a thin path, and then the rest would just be filled in. That was also not present in this formation. Also very, very noteworthy is the topography of the land inside this particular formation. Down this end, from around about here, sloping down to here, this was actually raising up like a large hill in the field. So this part of the formation was around about 3 to 4 meters higher than this part of the formation. So if you took a line from somewhere out here to create your arc, your semicircle effectively, it would have actually been almost a physical impossibility to do that, because your rope would have been on the ground about here, and you would have been dragging through the standing crop. So just a physical creation of that one arc would be extremely problematic. So on the whole, we were effectively looking for crushing around peripheral areas, central construction points, edges of circles, and like you said, post holes, stuff like that. And you would effectively go out into the field looking for areas within, you know, within your standing crop where people would have had to stand to create a wider image. In this particular case, none of the evidence that would suggest a hoax was present on the ground very early in the morning on the first day.
Some of these circles, it's very hard to see here when you get down to the actual, when you got down to the actual landscape. They're ever so tiny, aren't they?
Yeah.
The detail is amazing.
So what's extremely interesting about this, and it relates again to the actual topography of the land. This circle here, it was effectively on dead flat ground.
Right.
This circle here was on quite a heavy slope.
Yes.
And I measured both of these circles in cross section, and this circle, which was on heavily sloping ground, was elliptical, and it was elliptical by a large degree. We were talking like about 3 meters squashed in one side. This circle, which was on flat ground, was perfectly round. Now, if you go out and put a peg in the ground and fake a circle, it's going to be round, however steep the hill is. Everything about this formation suggested it came down. This circle looked circular from above, as did all of the ones on the slopes. Viewed from above, they're circular. Measured on the ground, they're elliptical.
Right.
Creating an ellipse on the ground physically, just draw an ellipse. It's very difficult to get it correct. Draw a circle, it's actually relatively easy. You know. So, and the same, I've measured many formations of a similar kind of nature over the years, most notably the Milk Hill 409 spiral from 2001. I spent an entire afternoon measuring one of the arms. One arm from the Milk Hill was kind of similar in effect to one of these, and that the position of that circle in the landscape, it was on a heavily undulating hilltop. You know, it's 1,000 foot wide. The whole formation, you could stand in any given part of it and just see bits
of it,
and when taking the time to measure one arm, literally I think there was around about 70 circles in each arm.
Wow.
Pretty much every circle which I personally measured in the same way, cross sections, every circle that was on the sloping ground was elliptical, every circle that was on flat ground was round.
As though it had either been stamped down or created to represent a circle when viewed from above.
Yeah. Final analyses of the original tapes taken by Wynne Keach shows this entire formation emerging in 8 minutes, and it's as if it scans into the field, so it's like a line goes across the field towards the hillside, towards the camera, and the whole thing just scans in, very subtle, very soft, no flashing lights, no Hollywood special effects, very simple, quite vague, almost boring, but there it is, it appears in 8 minutes. And you know, that would take 400 hoaxes 8 minutes to make that circle, and I didn't see him. I didn't see him in the film.
And they'd be quite noisy, wouldn't they? Something I believe happens when they say that it's not hoax, is that the lays tend to form patterns within themselves. You find the kind of spiral twists, you find the crisscross twists. There's a number of patterns in there, as well as kind of anomalous damage to the crop itself as well.
Sure. I would say there doesn't seem to be any one singular uniform method of crop laying down. You know, practically every single circle I've been in over the years, which is hundreds and hundreds of circles examined, most of the time the crop is kind of laid down differently, but we must remember we've got all different kinds of crop, and the age of the crop seems to make a difference. This was very mature-ish wheat, you know, as opposed to very young barley. The effect on crop seems very, very different, you know, depending on, as opposed to, say, oilseed rape or sweet corn. You know, these are huge, thick plants, and it's an entirely different subject almost again. So one has to be very careful about looking at physical evidence and then using that as a uniform protocol for looking at the entire crop phenomena.
It's the original hoaxers as we know them, Doug and Dave. One of them's died, the other guy kind of actually admitted that it wasn't him anyway, didn't he? But since then, you know, Team Satan, all these other kind of guys have dived in and said, yeah, we hoaxed every single one of those, we claim responsibility for those. When you're out in the field, literally as it were, out in these circles, out in these designs, what is it that stands out to you that suggests that maybe we're getting two things happening? We are getting hoaxing, but we're getting some kind of phenomenon as well. Is there a difference between circles, between designs, between the way they're laid?
There certainly is. I mean, on the ground, if you take a broad perspective, that all the crop circles from any given year, from all over the world, there is a certain amount of different styles, if you will, in a sense, even varying from region to region or country to country slightly. We go into a crop circle on the ground, okay, first we need to be in it to get an honest, reasonable and realistic physical analysis on the ground. We need to be in there very quickly, because clearly once numbers of people or busloads of visitors or tourists have gone in, you don't know how many people have been there, what they have been doing and where they were walking for sure. So if you're looking at physical damage, you don't know if this is caused by visitors, by hoaxers from the night before. So it becomes fairly inconclusive at that point. So really one has to be there probably by 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, especially in the busy part of the summer, to make a reasonable physical judgment. And at that time, if you get to the formations quickly, then yes, there are things to look for which would suggest it's a physical creation by some kind of mechanical device.
Such as?
Compression marks around the edges. In this formation here, for instance, we have like underlying all of these circles are kind of a fine arc, like a straight line. You can just see it between. You can just see it between the circles. So, for instance, if we go into this crops formation very early on the first day, we'd walk into all of the circles, and you'd kind of effectively pick. You know, the thin line has gone down, and all the wheat has swelled down on top. What one would do is lift up the crop which is laid down on top, exposing this fine line. And if this has been made by any kind of physical mechanism, that fine line would have had to have been basically crushed down to the ground by planks or feet. So we'd pick the crop up on top and see if the corn underneath is actually crushed in a kind of a rhythmic way, like foot paces. Incidentally, in this formation it actually was not.
We're hitting into crop circles now, you know, quite a few years later. It's not as though it's breaking news. It's not as though it's amazing stuff. Or is it? Is there something that's going on that makes crop circles still worth watching? Are we looking at a phenomenon that's unfolding before our eyes?
Okay. The evolution thus far has taken us to the point where we are receiving, almost on a daily basis in the summer months, huge, highly complex mathematical patterns of a real technical order. And at this time, you know, 30 years down the line, the origins of the majority of those circles remains a complete mystery. So absolutely certainly is well worth looking at. And whilst the evidence is on the table, as it has been for 20 or so years at least, you know, we're talking mathematical, biological and physical sciences which amount to evidence on the table, so suggesting without any doubt whatsoever that something strange and anomalous is happening to these plants inside the crop circles. That makes it well worth looking at. And the evolution is constant. They seem to be getting bigger and more impressive from a technical point of view year on year. And just this year, 2008, we've had more circles this year, this summer, in the last 8 weeks or so, than in the previous, any given summer from the previous 10 years. So something does seem to be kind of upping the ante, and the size and complexity of the circles. Sometimes we're having as many as 5 crop circles in one night. If you put this all down to human hoaxing, so there were 50 people out that night faking crop circles in the rain. You know, I mean, it stretches credibility. When we're looking at a new formation, obviously we're looking for the way the plants are bent, and they should be more or less even, just above the ground, and bent over neatly, all at the same height. The formations in oilseed rape, they're extremely interesting to look at. Any of the formations, oilseed rape or maize, sweet corn, any of the thick, hollow stem succulent plants, oilseed rape in particular, which the early season formations always occur in, those stems, they're very, very brittle. You know, I've knocked those down myself just as an experiment, just the same as I have with wheat and barley and all types of crop. And it is an absolute fact that whenever I have tried to bend down armfuls of oilseed rape, it all breaks off. You know, it snaps off at the ground. There's a big, ugly kink or a break, and it's clearly mechanically pushed down. I've been inside crop formations in oilseed rape where every single stem has that perfect bend and the plant is growing horizontal and there's no damage. You know, there's just no damage. That to me is an impossibility. With regard to the actual physical science and the collecting of samples and sending them to Michigan, this is for BLT research, Dr. William Levingood. You know, I myself do this once or twice a year, occasionally, as requested, effectively. And what we effectively do is take, in any given circle, we'd probably take around about 50, we'd take a diagram of the actual crop circle into the formation with 10 points marked on this diagram, and effectively collect a handful of stems and a handful of dirt that goes with the stems, put it in a bag, mark it as sample number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and go around the whole formation. So you've got a kind of basically a cross section of the entire formation covered, and then we would go out into the field like 200 meters from the actual crop circle formation and take another 10 samples from randomly around the field, so as the control samples. And these would effectively be shipped off to North America, where they would do their science, which involved checking the soil composition for any changes, checking actual plants for cellular or tissue changes, the growth nodes for elongation or moisture depletion, and also they would actually remove the seeds and check them for do tests with
little knuckles or nodes, as they call them, and they're intensely brittle. Now you can bend the corn here, but all you're doing is snapping it. Right?
Yes.
But actually on these little nodes, you can't bend them because they'll just snap.
No, here's one that is just a normal one.
You try
like you say, you bend it like that,
breaks.
Straight away breaks it, doesn't it?
But this is like it's been, if you look closer, you can see little stretch marks. It looks like it's been heated and stretched. Now researchers that have done, you know, investigations on this have examined and found there's been a chemical change in the wheat. And that it appears to have been subjected to something like a microwave kind of energy, where it's heated from the inside out, but only enough to bend the node. And obviously being very volatile, any more heat on it will just burn.
And it's kind of like an intense amount of heat, very, very, very short time as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So that's what I tend to go and look for.
Right. How many would you expect to find on a site like this?
Well, I'd expect to find loads.
Right. And the question has to be,
I mean, we found 2 already, just been here 5 minutes.
how many would you find outside? I mean, has there been a study done? Have there been studies done to prove that this is particular to crop patterns, crop circles?
There have been bent nodes found outside the crop,
Right.
particularly on the
runways.
on the runways,
Yeah, tramways.
where the crop has been knocked down, perhaps by the tractor going through, and then the crop's sort of growing back up,
Right.
up towards the sunlight. But the difference with these type of ones is the chemical change in the wheat.
Right.
As opposed to, so there is a natural phenomena of this apparently.
Yeah. Okay.
But there are specific things about the ones you find in the crop that's just, it's only just been laid, it hasn't been there like for a while and the crop's growing back up. These can be found in a crop that's only just gone down.
Over those 11 years, there's been like a number of like bizarre encounters, strange kind of encounters, effects on technologies, on myself, etc. First of all, with the technologies, cameras and electrical devices have regularly failed. I've gone into formations with a camera which has had a fully charged battery pack, and I've walked into a formation, switched it on, and the battery flattens like there, like literally in moments where you've got maybe 90 minutes of recording or photographing capacity in that battery. I've walked out of the formation and it's been fine, and I've walked back in and the battery's fed. There's obviously to me, it kind of suggested that there was some kind of residual electromagnetic field present, and that was interfacing with the devices. And this doesn't really happen all of the time. It seems quite random almost.
Right.
I haven't had any problems in crop circles with cameras for a couple of years at least. However, this year, for instance, I lent somebody my video camera to take into a formation, and exactly the same thing happened. My battery pack on that camera was failing for no apparent reason, but it did fail. I've actually had still cameras in formations where I've been trying to take pictures, and I'd switch the camera on, it would switch itself off, zoom would be coming in and out, it would just be doing its own thing, and it was like bizarre, really kind of like bizarre, kind of, you just standing there with your camera thinking, what the hell is going on with this, and those, I've heard of, I've spoken to farmers who have told me about tractors breaking down in circles, when they've been harvesting the field, it's like £200,000 harvester that just breaks down inside the circle. That's a part of recorded history of the phenomena. And also physiological effects on the individual. Over those 11 years, obviously, after going in hundreds of circles, most of the time there's no real feeling of, one tries to do this in an objective, sensible way in an attempt to get to the basic facts, the truth of the matter, we don't need to cloud it with fluff and stuff. So one generally goes down there with an objective positioning, and looking for physical damage, looking for effects on the plants, looking for anything which might suggest people or physical devices had done it, or alternatively, if there isn't any of that, and to say this is exactly how the formation was. But during some of that research, that time in the circles, I often have experienced strange effects where I could feel like really bizarre tinglings running up my arms or legs, really almost like kind of like a real subtle cramp. This is something I cannot explain whilst in physical movement. Headaches, I never get headaches, in normal everyday life. I just do not get headaches.
So you don't think that's because you're kind of thinking, well, this is a strange place, it's a bit weird, and you're kind of actually bringing it on yourself in any sense?
Probably not, because I would say not anyway, because one, again, a crop circle to me isn't a particularly weird place because I've been going into them for so long. It's kind of almost like going to Tesco's is weirder than going to a crop circle for me.
we react physiological to energy, whether it's electrical energy, whether it's radio, whether it's magnetic. As a physical being, we kind of do react to this. So it would certainly, sit quite hand in hand that if you've got equipment like cameras, like tractors reacting, that there's every sense that we're going to do the same, that if we're getting short-circuited on that level.
And there is a kind of suggestion, and it has been postulated quite a few times, that just the actual pattern being there, regardless of how it got there, whether it was aliens or interdimensionals or people with planks, with just the fact that there's a physical geometric shape in a canvas, if you will, which is, there's a disturbance effectively in the crop, that in some sense must create some kind of effect, just because it's there. One has to consider all possibilities, all options at this time, because we really don't have many answers on the table. Every human should be inquisitive. When I first saw these crop circles, I was researching UFOs and hidden history and suppressed information, the same as we all kind of do to a degree or another. And even though I was living, this is 11 years ago, I was living down in Devon, this is 130 miles away, pretty close, but I was largely unaware of this because the media never deal with it, in any kind of serious or objective way. So I was largely unaware of it. I had seen small circles on the TV when I was a child. I was kind of mystified, as a child would be, but and that was that. However, in '96, I bought this UFO magazine of some type or another, and there was a spread in this magazine of that year's crop circles, and it was the circles from 1996. There was a fractal spiral at Stonehenge, and a similar 3-arm fractal spiral and I saw these and thought, right, okay, I got a logical brain and I'm kind of reasonably educated. That's impossible. How can you got the A303 in Stonehenge there with its 24-hour guard, and you've got a 900-foot pattern there, which is that's a highly technical piece. To create the fractal spiral, one needs to create large rectangular boxes to generate the actual curve, meaning a massive construction area. That construction area clearly wasn't there in the field. The whole pattern looked singular and perfect by itself, right next to Stonehenge. That required an inquisitive person to check it out, just as a matter of course. And if one could happily conclude that was hoaxed or very cleverly done by people, then that would have been the end of my crop circle story. But the evidence, when we looked at the capabilities of Doug and Dave or whoever, relative to the fractal geometry which was happening, there was clearly a massive, massive gulf between what was there on the ground and what these people were claiming.
Well, when they first came out of the closet, as it were, they were claiming that they got a couple of planks with some ropes and a ping pong ball hanging on the front of their hat. And they're doing this all in dark, creating these, and it was literally the time the patterns had started changing, wasn't it? We'd had the circles, we'd had some of the insectograms, and all of a sudden things got complicated.
The whole phenomena seemed to kind of mushroom, and all of a sudden we were getting these massive expressive patterns incorporating very ancient symbolism, very deep, meaningful things to indigenous persons from all over the world. It seemed as if the system, the media, the government, somebody, they got to get a lid on this, because people are really starting to pay attention. When the first major, very large pictogram formation happened down at Alton Barnes Eastfield, just where this new formations happened actually, there were thousands and thousands of people down there, because it got some pretty heady media attention in the early days. They didn't all of a sudden jump on, it's got to be a hoax because we don't understand it, therefore it must be a hoax. There wasn't any of that at that time, and thousands and thousands, and it looked like the whole thing was going to blow up and get serious international attention, and something or someone or some element of the system clearly didn't like that, and all of a sudden, what a surprise, Doug and Dave were produced, knocked down a couple of highly mediocre circles for the TV cameras, and it was actually embarrassing what they'd done, but it was enough. It created an impression in the pretty much in the international consciousness, and that went around the world in a week. There are things that happen on this planet which are truly amazing, which never make it into the media.
meet a lot of people kind of coming to these places. Some people seem to be drawn for the spirituality, if you like, the experience of a space that has been created out of a natural product. Other people are drawn by the kind of wackiness of it, and other people drawn by the science of it, the what's going on here kind of thing.
All of those aspects interest me, actually. So having, worked for so long in this field as a psychic artist, I'm aware that there are beings that exist in other dimensions.
A lot of people talk about channeling. We talk about it with respect to where we get our music from,
Right.
where people get their books from, where people get their art from.
Yeah.
And it seems that we kind of draw on maybe the universe, maybe the world, maybe nature. Something comes in and out. Is maybe something similar happening here, that there is a kind of, I don't know, nature at work, a force at work, something like that?
I think that's very likely. I mean, the Earth itself is a living, conscious being. It could be the Earth choosing to communicate with us in a way that we would relate to. I mean, personally, I'm open to all the possibilities, because as I'm aware that there are these other dimensions of reality, which quantum physicists now also acknowledge. We use the word spirit world, but they might use the term a multi-dimensional universe, interdimensional levels of being, and therefore, to me, it's quite feasible that there are beings that operate in those other dimensions, and that we communicate with them on a conscious-to-consciousness level, and using a picture or a pictorial image is a bit similar to, like, the idea of is it the yantra that the Indians use to meditate on?
Yeah.
It's a specific shape, it's geometric.
Yes.
And it tunes you into universal consciousness. And I really feel that that's a very large part of what some of these images are, even if we don't understand it from a scientific perspective, just by seeing the image. And
Picture speaks 1,000 words.
It communicates on an intuitive level.
Absolutely.
And you get what you get from it. Someone else might get something else. There is this multi-dimensional, aspect to them, and that's what draws me. I like the whole concept of all those ideas.
Back in 1999, down at Milk Hill, White Horse, just near Alton Barnes, there was a formation in oilseed rape, and I decided to spend the night in that formation, the night after it actually occurred, it arrived. And at the time I was here with my partner and a friend of ours, so those two decided to spend their night right on the Milk Hill White Horse. Around about between 11:30 and 12, something seemed to descend over the circle. I could not hear the cars on the road, the farmer vehicles, but it was really odd. And about a minute or so after this whole kind of effect took place, this large orb of light, about the size of a beach ball, it was pretty big, like just appeared right there, right in front of me, inside the circle. It was kind of lit from the inside, lighting up the ground around it and the stems, and it was just hanging there above the ground. That stayed in place for about 1 minute, and then it just faded out to nothing over the course of a few seconds. And then the following morning, my partner comes into the formation with our friend, and before I say anything, she said that we saw from our position up on the White Horse an orb of light come streaking across the field, across the top of the crop, which was 6 feet high, and dip down into the crop circle where you were. If you're a farmer and you go to the police about a crop circle, they'll record it as criminal damage, end of story. And which is very curious, because again, the evidence just does not fit the criminal damage theory. And when you kind of take tentatively all of these pieces and put them together, including a kind of what seems to be a kind of interest from some element of the system, the government, the authorities, there's something else going on here. Even in
a multitude worth of mechanisms, or that there isn't an answer yet that will explain all of these different angles.
After 10 years of research, 10 years of intimately looking at the circles, looking at the maths, the physics, the science, the evidence in general. There is no kind of litmus test that is saying this is a genuine crop circle and that's not. You know, it's nowhere near as simple as that at all. The best one can really, 11 years later I got more questions than answers. I thought it was going to be very simple. I thought I'd come over here to Wiltshire, I'd have a look at a circle or two, I'd find out it was man-made or it was something else, and that would be that, and I'd go back home to Devon and I would do my thing. Instead, I came here, I stayed here, and I'm still here 11 years later, amongst other things, but still trying to figure this out. How could this be possible? Inside this formation, we clearly have a physical construction method that makes sense to our basic logic, but the evidence on the ground suggests that this is not a physical construction because there's no physical construction traces, and with the video footage and the surrounding events of that night with this particular formation, the idea of human construction is effectively impossible, even though people have claimed to have made this formation as they claim to make effectively all the formations. The day after this formation emerged, a group of people who live in that particular area come forward and said, yes, we made that. We started at 10:30 in the evening. We finished it at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I could go out and I could claim that I've started this. Anybody could. So a claim in itself is nowhere near good enough. We used to go and spend a lot of nights in crop circles and just leave. And there was one particular crop circle, I can't remember what year, I think it was 1997. And we all went to sleep at 1 o'clock in the morning, even the dog, which was unusual because normally it'd be pacing around chasing rabbits and doing its thing. We woke up at 6 o'clock the next morning and there was a formation 400 feet long in the field right next to us.
And the dog hadn't noticed.
No, we didn't, the dog didn't, and it's really, I could possibly imagine that we could have slept through something going on next to us, but the dog, no way. We are so heavily conditioned, from the moment we're born, basically, we're conditioned to believe in very particular, narrow ways what's right, what's wrong, what's real and what's unreal, and so I guess the animals, they don't have the cultural conditioning to a degree that we do, and that's why
we're conditioned to block it out as well because it becomes useless for us within this fast-paced world, within the world of Tesco's, Morrison's, getting to work and back in 7 hours. Too much information.
It's kind of, in a sense, you can kind of understand that many people may not want to accept the reality that something's going on here, because ultimately it would need a reappraisal of just everything we've ever learned. But this isn't happening for no good reason, and when you look at the implications of some of the designs, very, very ancient designs which relate directly to the state of human consciousness at this time on our planet, it could be something really important happening here, and it's being largely marginalised or ignored just because people are either in the media or either too lazy or too scared or too controlled, I don't know what.
Under the shadow of nearby Sisbury Rings hill fort, Roger Sear can be found testing the strange and wondrous effects of what he affectionately calls a witch's ring. In the circle of swirled corn, he has already noticed the needle of his compass go berserk, been aware of an electrical burning type smell, and received a static electrical shock from his bicycle parked nearby. Now he is testing the magnetization of a pocket watch and knife that he has stuck into the soil whilst aware of a strange tickling sensation in his feet. A nearby dog still refuses to enter the circle, and he can feel a headache coming on. This may sound like a modern scientist experimenting on the latest phenomenon we call crop circles, but it is actually 1927, and recorded disturbances of this sort have been occurring in this area of Sussex since at least 1830. In fact, way back in 1678, a pamphlet was released entitled The Mowing Devil, or Strange News out of Hertfordshire, telling how a strange fire illuminated a farmer's corn the night after he refused to employ the neighbourhood mower. The next morning he found circles of flattened corn that he thought too perfect for mortal man to be able to do the like. Many more examples of fairy rings, crop circles, and associated phenomena can be found littering the pages of folk history since time memorable into the late 20th century, until they finally became a report in the Wiltshire Times on August the 15th, 1980. The photos of 3 circles of flattened corn below the hill fort of Bratton grabbed the attention of scientists and amateurs alike, and the crop circle investigator, or Croppy, was born. Initially, the circles were just that, circles, in singles or multiples, which led to the first tentative explanation that they were created by stationary whirlwinds. It was soon noted, though, that they seemed to appear close to hill forts and other megalithic constructions, as well as areas containing large amounts of water, and that their appearance was often accompanied by strange light shows and eerie, high-pitched electrical chirping sounds. The whirlwind itself seemed to get more intelligent and increase its ability as circles became accompanied by both rings and lines of flattened corn, with patterns being added to at later dates, and various swirls and weaves being found in the underlay of these formations. Explanations had to be found, and included wild young farmers with string and planks, interference from mobile phones, and even flocks of artistic birds. But no one could explain how the bends in the corn appeared to be almost steamed into place, causing no subsequent damage to the plant's continued development, flowering in the case of canola, and growth. The whirlwind theory was further stumped in 1990 when a new formation appeared at Chilcombe Farm in Wessex. 2 circles connected by a ruler straight runway, flanked by 4 rectangular boxes, formed the first ever pictogram. The most famous of these pictures in the corn, that seem more akin to early petroglyphs and hieroglyphs, appeared at Alton Barnes and made international news, drawing crowds from all over the world to experience what for some was a life-transforming encounter. With the crops being surveyed night and day by scientists and journalists, it seemed inevitable that at some point they would be copied by hoaxers, as in the case of a human-made circle sponsored by the Daily Mirror to increase its ratings. On September the 9th, 1991, the Today newspaper announced that 2 men in their 60s were responsible for the entire crop circle phenomena, with the aid of a baseball cap, ping pong ball and some well-placed moonlight. In the meantime, crop circles and pictograms were appearing all over the world, and not only in corn, but ice, snow, sand, and even rice fields. In Canada, where there are no tram lines to give access to formations and no signs of entry, an unfortunate porcupine seemed to have got itself caught up in the circle creation process, leaving a trail of swirled skid marks made by its quills, leading to its completely flattened body in the centre. The patterns themselves have transformed many times over the 90s and into this century, becoming more complex, larger, and involving greater and greater amounts of elements, from Mandelas and Julia sets appearing in minutes within sight of Stonehenge, to complex geometrical and quantum figures materializing close to scientific and military bases. The phenomenon seems to amend and revise itself from year to year, always staying one step ahead of the current theory, always challenging the existing speculation. Whether man-made or resulting from a multifaceted, energetic reaction, this landscape art can only be truly experienced by riding high in the sky in a helicopter or plane. The pictures themselves transcend spoken language and seem to talk to some on a higher level, but unless you have stood in the centre of hundreds of yards of flattened corn, the full impact of these cosmic designs cannot make any sense.
Let us take you on a journey into the world of music, spirit, and meditation. Will it be
back in 1999, down at Milk Hill, White Horse, just near Alton Barnes, there was a formation in oilseed rape, and it was clearly a genuine formation, as we were talking about just now. All the stems were very neatly bent. This was from a physical construction point of view, I would have considered that impossible. There's no doubt about it. And I decided to spend the night in that formation, the night after it actually occurred, it arrived. Clearly this formation down at Milk Hill there was genuine, and as a genuine formation it was worthy of some more attention, so the one decided to go and spend the night in that formation, and at the time I was here with my partner and a friend of ours. So those two decided to spend their night right on the Milk Hill White Horse, which was about 400 to 500 meters behind me, and elevated by 30 or 40 meters. So they had a clear, commanding view across the field, directly in front of them where the formation was, which I was then sat in. And got into the formation, and effectively just sat down, got myself comfortable. It was a nice night. Around about between 11:30 and 12, not absolutely sure of the time because everything went a bit strange. This whole kind of like an envelope seemed, or some kind of something seemed to descend over the circle in a way that prior to this I could hear cars and things on the road travelling back and forth. I could hear it was dead still, very quiet. So all the ambient countryside noises, and animals and stuff, farm machinery, whatever, just a normal evening's kind of ambient sound in the background. All of a sudden, around about 11:30, 12, this kind of envelope of just like a feeling came down over the whole formation, and all of a sudden I could not hear the cars on the road, the farm vehicles, animals, mice, whatever, just everything suddenly went dead still. It was really odd. It was like really odd, and I was kind of used to being in strange situations anyway, but that was really odd. Then I kind of sat there thinking, God, should I leave the formation, because it did feel like, but I decided not to, because this was 6 foot high oilseed rape plants with no discernible tram lines, and I'd have just walked in circles all night if I tried to leave the formation anyway, so I didn't bother. And so must have been just like a minute or so after this whole feeling came down over the formation, I was sat in the actual kind of circular element of the formation, which was only about maybe 20 meters in diameter, and it had a standing chunk of oilseed rape crops stood up in the middle, which was kind of, they're quite thick, well spaced apart stems, so you could kind of see through them. And about a minute or so after this whole kind of effect took place, this large orb of light, about the size of a beach ball, it was pretty big, like just appeared right there, right in front of me, inside the circle, but behind this standing chunk of crop. And so all of these plants were suddenly kind of silhouetted in this whole glowing kind of orb behind it, almost like translucent kind of, those, you get like soap bubbles that you blow with like child's things, almost like one of those, and it was kind of lit from the inside, lighting up the ground around it and stems, and it was just hanging there above the ground. And it must have stayed there for around about 1 minute. I had time to kind of pretty much shift my position, move so the standing plants weren't in front of me, so I could, have a better look. And it was like absolutely, definitely there, self-luminous, hovering just above the ground, and it just stayed there for 1 minute or so. And after, without even really moving, it was just more or less stationary and shimmering. And
so it wasn't a form of marsh gas or will-o'-the-wisp kind of thing?
Highly unlikely. That wheat field is not a marsh.
Right, okay. Yeah.
No, it was actually a very circular kind of uniform. It wasn't like a sort of little kind of thing, and it actually stayed still for, as I said, up to about 1 minute. So it wasn't anything that I could reconcile with anything that I was familiar with, and being a kind of researcher of UFOs and strange things and strange encounters, one would consider every possibility. That stayed in place for about 1 minute, and then it faded out to nothing over the course of a few seconds. It was like it tuned in and then tuned out, and it was very, very odd. And then the following morning, my partner comes into the formation with our friend, and before I say anything, she says, "You're not going to believe what we saw last night." And what she says they saw was like an orange orb of light, and as I perceived the thing in the formation, it had a kind of orange tinge to it rather than orange. But anyway, she said that we saw from our position up on the White Horse an orb of light come streaking across the field, across the top of the crop, which was 6 feet high, and dip down into the crop circle where you were, and that's what they said. So before I actually said it, so to a degree there was some kind of secondary objective observation of something which effectively confirmed that whatever it was, there was something in that formation which I absolutely couldn't explain, and no more than I could actually explain the emergence of the actual circle, which was undoubtedly genuine.
On the evening of, it's the early morning of the 7th of the 7th of the 7th this year, about 1:35 a.m, my friend Paula and I arrived at the top of Knapp Hill to begin an all-night vigil looking over Eastfield in the hope that a formation may appear. When we arrived there, we encountered a cameraman by the name of Wynne, who had been keeping vigils at the top of Knapp Hill over Eastfield for the last 16 years. He had a series of cameras which he had set up on top of the hill and lower down the hill, parked up on his car. He had a camera mounted on the roof and also a camera mounted up looking through the window of his vehicle. These were run into VCR video machines and powered by 12-volt batteries, and kept a constant vigil on the field itself from 11:08 until about 3:13, and then the tapes were changed, and then further tapes run from about 3:14 to 5:30ish. We sat on the hill. It was, apart from being a very windy evening, we engaged in all sorts of metaphysical conversations, and then around 3:13, I'm told from the timing on the tape that we all experienced a big white flash in the sky, which very momentarily lit the whole sky up and the whole landscape, but it was very momentarily. There didn't seem to be a source of this of the flash. It was just a complete sheet lightning. It was at about that time that Wynne was reminded that the tapes needed to be changed on the cameras, so he popped down to the vehicle to do that and came back up, and we carried on chatting. At this point of the evening, about 3:20, it's the darkest point of the night, and as the sky was sort of really laden with clouds, there was absolutely nothing. It was a pitch black field and there was nothing to be seen down below. But at about 20 to 4, some light was creeping in then from the east with the sun coming up, and we began to see a shadow, or what appeared to be shadows on the field. Curious about this, Wynne jumped up and looked through one of the cameras which he had set up on the hill, which is a very powerful light-sensitive camera, capable of 1 lux capacity, so any bit of light will give a very good image. It was at this point when he looked through the camera that we all could see through the viewfinder that there was a massive, absolutely massive, spectacular formation down there below us. Although at this particular time we still couldn't see it with the naked eye, it was still just a slightly imperceptible shadow. That was it really. Once we started seeing it, we were dancing and cheering, because we knew that this formation hadn't been there the night before, and it was also quite evident that there had been no lights or any activity in the field below us. We'd seen and heard it. And so we knew that all hoax theories of formations which have been banning about, or claimed theories which have been banning about over the years, that we had the evidence that disproved that. And also from our own personal subjective experiences, we all had a thoroughly good time.
And there's been, a whole series of, over the years, decades even, there's been, a huge amount of encounters by people with strange lights and stuff like that. Another time, very briefly actually, another time, myself and my partner, we were inside a formation over near Silbury Hill, just down the road from here, and we sat inside this formation for the night. It was just a summer night, with our dog, and it was very nice. And we saw, as it became dusk around about 10 o'clock, it was the height of the summer, but we could see, all the landscape was quite clear. It was getting dark, and in the distance we had the sanctuary, which is just to the east of Avebury, and the tree line there, and we saw from our position in the formation about half a mile away a large orange orb of light just appear in the sky, like literally blink on just above the trees by this the sanctuary, which is a real hotspot for crop circle activity and UFO and kind of related weird stuff. Wow, you know, we sat there, kind of, my camera started going. We were talking about earlier. It's,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm half a mile from this thing, but my camera, the lens is shooting itself in and out. The camera's
Right.
switching itself on and off. There seemed to be some direct. It really, whatever, did not want me to take it. I spent half an hour or so trying to use my camera, and I literally couldn't use it. Now, by the next time, because again it's a print film camera,
Yeah.
and by the next time I'm really not at all sure I actually managed to take any pictures at all.
Right.
But the really strange thing was this light was just literally above the trees and kind of swaying around, and it was moving around independently, quite purposefully, and we thought, God, you know, maybe there's a crop circle going down
Yeah.
there, you know, maybe. And we watched this light for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then from behind us, as we were watching that, we heard the sound of a helicopter coming
Yeah.
at us really
Yeah.
fast, and it sounded like a big, heavy helicopter, like
Yeah.
a Jolly Green Giant or something. And you know it was, and this helicopter came tearing over our heads right towards this light, and it was going really fast. It was really, you could just tell the way it was flying, its height and the direction. It was focused on heading to that spot, and it headed right to that spot. And as it got right to it, more or less exactly where the light was, the light blinked out, disappeared completely in a moment, and reappeared over to the south and east, which is westwards. Which is like 6 miles away in a straight line. It is like literally off there, on there, and this helicopter is just left spinning on the spot. But there seemed to be really some focused intent that they knew that was there,
Yeah.
you know, and they went to look at it, or they
Yeah.
went to investigate or whatever. And as soon as the helicopter gets there, the light disappears, the helicopter's kind of spinning on the spot, wondering what's what. And, you know, a few moments later, the helicopter just disappears back past us the way it came. And the light actually blinks off from where it was and re-emerges back in its original position.
Right.
But, you know, curious light show, but no circle, so no idea what that was about. But it did kind of demonstrate that there was somebody in a helicopter very interested in that
Yeah.
light at that space. I've watched people make crop circles. I
Right.
flatten crop myself. You know, I can briefly explain what these people are like and what they do.
When I was young, I will admit, when I was very, very young, I used to, way before any of this appeared, I used to actually like making patterns in crop.
Did you?
So I'm kind of actually aware of the process.
When I was actually-
a very funny thing.
I actually got a bollocking from a
Yeah.
farmer when I was really young for doing that. I was just rolling it with my body. You know,
Yeah.
my brothers were rolling out massive patches of wheat for no apparent reason.
We used to weave it into patterns and into literally stuff
Really?
like this. Yeah, because where I was is up the road where I used to live, about 40 miles up the road, and there was a lovely field with a railway bank running next to it, so you could make patterns, then go up onto the railway bank and see
Yeah.
the patterns you'd made.
Huh.
Absolutely beautiful, kind of little mazes and things.
So it's all your fault.
Absolutely, we started crop circles off. We were Doug and Dave before Doug and Dave got there. Right, Nick, you just showed me some corn you found a minute ago.
Yeah, where is it? I gave it to Jenny.
We've got the close-up of the corn, and I've done the close-up shot, and Jenny's lost the corn. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Where's that bit of corn? Didn't you want to put a piece of corn in it?
I don't even remember putting it down. Oh no. I just pressed pause, I think.
One of the most strange things about that little encounter was that I had a good camera with me all the time,
Right.
and I had this camera around my neck. It was a kind of old-fashioned print film,
Yeah.
Pentax, really old camera. You know, it was.
And you didn't take a picture?
Nah,
You didn't think?
what a piss. No, I didn't think at all. But the really strange thing was this light was just literally above the trees and kind of swaying around, and it was moving around independently, quite purposefully. And we thought, God, you know, maybe there's a crop circle going down
Yeah.
there. You know, maybe.
What's that?
No. But it could have been.
What is reality? Reality? Realty? What is real? What is reality? Reality. Reality is a $6 burger. Reality is people dying senselessly. Reality is labour-saving devices. Reality is a grilled cheese sandwich. Reality is a vision of success. Reality is deep within the sea. Reality is what you can't see. Reality is what you can't hear. Reality is people you love. Reality is the weather. Reality is the world that came before our own. But isn't reality what you make it? Walking the hills and dales, the breadth and depth of England's green and pleasant lands, you are bound to stumble at some point or another into the centre of a ring of weathered and ancient stones. An interdimensional time capsule built tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of years ago. But was it by chance or by design?
For those who have stepped forth into the enigmatic and complicated world of UFO research, they know that it is rife with division. But here, just like religion, we have another reason for the numerous splits, as the enigma really comes down to the individual human experience. There are many who have claimed that they have been visited by aliens or beings from other dimensions. The vast majority, like people who see ghosts and apparitions, believe in the data from experiences they encountered with their very own eyes. The unconscious mind remains a mystery because we are simply not conscious of it. We must imagine what it is like inside this huge domain on the other side of our daily realities. Occasionally, people recall their encounters in this strange world in dreams, and more interestingly, lucid dreams, whereby we become conscious of elements of our unconscious world and even interact with them. If we remain neutral, then we avoid excluding any possibilities that have yet to emerge in our conscious and unconscious minds. We avoid putting ourselves into any framed paradigm, as in the case of science and logic. Perhaps we need to abandon any previous notions or ideas about this phenomenon to gain headway into the unknown. What are the UFOs? Are they emanating from ourselves? Are they here only because we have the capacity to perceive them? Perhaps they are ancient archetypes that we have forgotten within the sands of time. Whatever they are very real to the experiencer. They are real to countless thousands who encounter them more and more each year as the sightings continue to multiply. What are they trying to tell us? If we can understand the UFOs, perhaps we can better understand ourselves. Is free of the demands placed upon him by government. What are his opinions on ancient astronauts, black technology and the psychology of belief in UFOs. And last, but not least, aliens.
Our world, all the other worlds, all the planets, all universes, parallel universes, whatever there may be, every blade of grass, every animal is interconnected in some way, shape or form.
Some say the end of mankind is near. Some say that economic and financial turmoil is part of the process, along with global warming, warfare, and the spread of mass psychosis.
When there's no place you feel at home, and you think you'll be better off alone.
Children are prescribed drugs to keep them calm. The climate is changing all around us, while celebrities become our gods and materialism the new mantra.
We live in an era where we're obsessed by celebrity. We live in an era where everyone wants a route out of their ordinary lives, and people want a quick fix these days. I mean, the idea of learning a trade from your father or doing a 5-year apprenticeship's gone out of the window. People now want to go on Big Brother and become a celebrity overnight. People want to be a wag.
Is there a reason behind this modern-day madness? Are our material lives making us truly content?
If I want to know what the truth is, I have to live truthfully. And as long as I live as truthful to myself and to others, then I'm like in the vibration of truth. Therefore, it will resonate with me or not.
But there is a ratio to it all, a rhyme and reason behind everything that we do and everything that affects us.
Did this really happen by accident? Did this whole universe and us living on this planet in this fragile atmosphere, in this one place in the universe? It is beyond thought, it is beyond words, but there is a purpose to it.
Once people start connecting with what they think and what they believe, once they start taking the more innocent point of view that their ancestors took, I think there is still hope for the survival of this human race. Because if they don't, we will poison ourselves off this planet eventually, I think.
Like mad magicians seeking to rule the world, men of renown have fleetingly seen the epic nature of the ancient code and its alluring essence, but all too often they fall into an abyss of their own making, choosing the wrong side of the code. But today we too have missed the point in our everyday complacency. We choose to exist in a waking sleep. We spend time naming things and separating them, classifying endless parts and pieces without remembering the whole, the one from which all things come. It needs no hatred nor warfare. It needs no drugs. It simply is. For you are the key to the code.
once you've found that point of connection in yourself, where you are part of nature, part of the world around you, and it is part of you, then no secret, no quantum physics, quantum spirituality can get anywhere near that point of unique connection, because you've found yourself and you've found your own God within yourself.
Well, here I am, it's the middle of the night, setting off to go to Norway to meet a very unusual Viking man who's made an incredible discovery.
This is really quite exciting. I mean, they produced, like, let's say, a talisman on a very, very grand scale. I mean, it's so huge that it's quite unbelievable. You have to have the knowledge, and you have to have, of course, the golden mean, because this is the key to the whole thing, really. And without it, you would never find it. But when you know that that is the key, you can unlock it and you can find the design. And that city is now called Trondheim, but it's only been called that for the last few hundred years. Its original name is Nidaros. Nidar, serpent in Celtic, and Ros, old knowledge. So actually the city was called Old Serpent Knowledge.
That is fascinating. What Harold's discovered is remarkable. It's massive. It's as big as the Great Wall of China or the Great Pyramids of Egypt. But it's something that had to be hidden. He discovered a circle on the ground that measured 666. He discovered a pentagram upside down. And he discovered the serpent. 3 images that we are told and have been told for an awful long time are symbols of evil. But this isn't the truth. The truth is that these are symbols of wisdom, symbols of greater knowledge. And that's what I leave Norway with.
Along the wilderness road they come. Behind them, the struggles of the Revolutionary War. Before them, the conquest of a wilderness. The journey is long and arduous, but it leads to a land of promise. Day after day, the party follows the unfamiliar trail.
Bigfoot, also known in North America as the Sasquatch or the Oma. Was the Sasquatch here before the Indians? Thousands of Indian locations are named after the boss of the mountain, or the wild man, as the Bigfoot was originally called by the Amerindians. Indian cultures generally regard the wild man with the greatest respect. He is viewed as a special kind of being, perhaps because of his seemingly close relationship to humans. Many Indian elders regard him as standing on the border between animal and human consciousness, giving him a supernatural kind of power. But as special as he may be, there is no tribe that suggests that he is anything other than a physical being, living in the same physical dimensions as humans and other animals. He eats, he sleeps, gathers, and communicates with family members. It seems that the wild man may indeed be of a varied and widespread clan, encompassing every continent of the world. They all have one very distinct trait in common: an exceptionally big human-like foot. Our search for this film brings us to the great state of Kentucky, the bluegrass state, and the home of the Kentucky Derby. Throughout the last 100 years, there have been many wild man sightings in Kentucky.
There's something in there. There's something right in there. In there. Listen. Hear it? Yeah. There's something moving in this tree line along the edge. It looks like they're hearing it over there. They're down.
Brighter, Philip? It's a light from the road, the blue light. It's getting brighter and brighter and brighter.
Dude, look through here. Look through there right now. What is it?
You can't see it, but the camera picks it up.
Holy shit. Let me see.
Look at that.
Look at it. What is that?
I don't know.
Oh.
Here, back up so you can see it.
Whoa.
I'm gonna walk over there. Can you zoom in on it? Let's go up here. Come on.
Hold on. It's something. It is something low spread. We can't see it, but the camera can see it.
Let's move in. Come on.
Hold on. Don't take your camera off of it. I'm not. Just stay there like you will. Don't lose it.
The idea behind a Celtic cross is that it should actually spin. Okay, so it spins on 2 occasions
I mean,
now.
that image is just going to blow people away. Because we've all been seeing this thing in stone.
Well, they see it as a gravestone,
Yeah.
and it's put on a grave for a purpose. Those that were Gnostic or knowledgeable put it on the grave as an instrument for people to navigate their way to heaven, and heaven is the stars, of course.
Now, I see a very historical link there. You used the word Gnostic.
Yes.
And this has become a Celtic symbol to us.
Yes.
Of course, the Celtic Church
Yes.
We know probably came from early Gnostics or Essene.
Yes.
So this is some kind of hidden wisdom, maybe.
It's a hidden wisdom, an ancient one that I can trace back at least 36,000 years.
36,000 years?
Yes, and it had to do with hunter-gatherers. You need to tell the time to be able to navigate, and to navigate you need to be able to use the stars, as the Polynesians have proven. At the top of here we have a symbol which they call the fleur-de-lis, which is on the top of all navigational sea charts, and it's quite ancient. It goes way back. In fact, they've got one in the Vatican. But that's similar, if you look, to this symbol here, which is the Aryan symbol for Aries, okay, and called point of Aries, at the rising point of the sun. The Aries hook is made of bronze because it's reflective, and it's perfect for viewing the stars. And so what they would have done, one observer at night, so as not to obscure their eyes, would have lit a dim light or torch in the background and been able to hold this against the stars.
The Dixon relic, then, where are we saying
The Dixon relic would have been fitted to the top of the spar. So, in effect, what you have is...
perfectly holds the line of the plumb.
Perfectly holds the line of the plumb. There has been no finding of an inclinometer until I reinterpreted the Dixon relics of 1872.
So not only have you patented the Celtic cross,
yes,
twice,
yes,
you've reinterpreted what the Celtic cross is,
yes,
did,
yes,
and even the sacred nature of that. You've
yes,
now basically explained how they managed to create something so incredibly accurate as the Great Pyramid at Giza.
yes.
The circle becomes a sacred space, and here's the sacredness. And here, I think, is where some of the original knowledge lies, because the circle represents time. It represents that kind of fixed versus chaos. It represents, as you said, good and bad. If you look at the kind of structure of a church, it maintains the same structure, doesn't
yes,
it?
Yes, it does.
The knowledge of fertility, the knowledge of cycles, the knowledge of why procreation is important to be done at particular times of the year as opposed to any time you like.
Why do we think in medieval maps or charts it says in the Atlantic Ocean, here be dragons? That's to keep people away from the trade routes. Why would you give away your knowledge? And they didn't give away their knowledge, they kept it. This was only for initiates, it was only for royalty, it was only for priests.
They were an absolutely phenomenal order, and they were suppressed under charges of heresy. There was a massive wave of arrest that started on October the 13th, 1307. Friday the 13th, unlucky for some, they claimed that that saying came from the arrest of the Templars. And they were suppressed by the Pope, not convicted of heresy, oddly enough, but because they had fallen into disrepute. And they disappeared from plain sight at that point. Their records were suppressed or stolen, we're not quite sure which. And that has left a sort of vacuum of information which has been filled by every fantasist in the business. And they've been writing about the Templars in bizarre terms for nearly 200 years now. In reality, although the Templars were ostensibly a Christian order, they were heretical in the extreme. And they had been formed as a result of a family conspiracy which involved people whose antecedents stretched back over 1,000 years before the foundation of the Templar order, and families who still exert considerable influence today, and who, several centuries after the suppression of the Templars, played an instrumental role in the foundation of another controversial order, the Worldwide Brotherhood of Freemasonry. There was also a period where the Knights of Malta were under investigation by the Inquisition because of their membership of several leading members of the order within the ranks of Freemasonry. The point of that secret society, the point of alchemy, the point of the search for the Holy Grail, which is inextricably linked with the Knights Templar, is it's all about a pathway of spiritual transformation, which of course immediately places those who follow it outside the remit of the Church and classes them as heresy.
The Knights Templars were formed ostensibly to protect pilgrims en route. It's very odd that such a small group could actually do such an enormous job. Maybe that was just their motive, their way of getting in, because it may well be they were looking for something and they wanted access to the holy places of Jerusalem. And they were seeking something in Jerusalem near the temple site because they had information. They were outside the mainstream of Christianity in the sense that they sought an area where the Cathars were already established. And the Cathars had a dualistic, aesthetic, and a reverence for Mary Magdalene and John the Baptist too. It looks like if you track that back to the origins, that must have come from some original concepts of Gnosticism, the sort of reverence for Solomon's temple coming through in their architecture and through into Freemasonry. I mean, I happen to believe that there's a lineage between the Templars and Freemasonry. One of the other things that the Templars found is treasure. Copper Scroll is one of these scrolls found at Qumran in Cave 3 in 1952, and it's an engraved list of buried treasure. Unbelievably, incredible.
And have we got any further with the Copper Scroll in the last few years?
Well, I have.
Do tell. Have you found any treasure?
Well, yes. I mean, I do identify... Yes, I've held treasure that's described in the Copper Scroll in my hand.
Incredible.